In this video, I'm going to show you how you can scan and create a 3D model of yourself using an Xbox 360 Kinect scanner and then print it off with your 3D printer. So one of the first things that I did after I got a 3D printer was I went online and I looked up cool things that you can print off. And one of the things I saw was people had scanned themselves, or at least from shoulders up, and printed it on their 3D printer. And I thought that was really cool. And early on, several years ago, I had done this with a program called PhotoFly, which was from AutoCAD. And the way that worked is you took pictures with your camera around an object or around a building, and PhotoFly, you would upload them to the AutoCAD server and it would try to stitch them together with the images, and it never really worked very well. I would say 20% of the time it would work successfully. I scanned part of my house and I scanned an ocarina that I made, but even so, there were areas that were bowed and it didn't stitch well together. Recently they came up with a program called 123D Catch, and the same thing, you could use it with your phone. I never could get it to work. You would upload it, take all these pictures, wait 10 minutes, and it would say error or it failed, so it never really worked. And recently I saw that someone had 3D printed themselves, and they said they did it with an Xbox 360 Kinect scanner. And I thought, that's pretty cool. I wonder how much these are. Now, if you go on Amazon, you can get a refurbished one for 40 bucks. If you go on eBay, you can get a used one anywhere between $25, $35. And I actually got this on Craigslist the same day I looked it up for 10 bucks. They had offered it for 20 bucks with some games, and I said, hey, how about if I show up right now, I'll give you 10 bucks. I don't even want the games or anything. And they said, fine. Now, I kind of got lucky in that I got the right model and the right plugs and everything. But I could have easily gotten the wrong one and it wouldn't have worked. So make sure you get the right scanner itself. Okay, so let's talk about the scanner itself. This is an Xbox 360 Kinect, and this is version 1. There's a version 2 which is square, but this is version 1, and I actually got it. They had the box with it, and they had a couple manuals. I think the way it works is there's 2 cameras and 1 infrared camera, I think is what I've heard. Now, as far as cables, there is 1 cable that comes out of the back, and it's permanently attached. And it's a long cable, and it runs to a plug, which kind of looks like a USB plug. It's not. It's orange on the inside, and it's got a little different fitting. There's not a tongue on it. There's 2 orange tabs. And that plugs into a splitter. And here's the splitter. It says Xbox 360. And now from that, one end runs to a USB plug. Now, I don't know what this gray adapter is, or whether I could just plug this directly into the computer. I don't know if this came with it or it's something they had. I've only tried it with the gray plug and it's worked fine. I don't know if I need it. I should probably look that up and let you know. It might work just plugging the split end into the computer, but like I said, they had this gray adapter and that's what I've used. Now, the other end of the splitter goes to power, and that just plugs into the wall. So luckily, I don't know if this is the setup for an Xbox 360. I've never had one, but this is what I used. I plugged this into the USB on my computer and plugged this in, and the light turned on. So you'll plug this into your computer and it will say recognize new hardware, and it'll say not installed properly. So you have to install the proper drivers, and it's a little bit tricky to install the right drivers. You need version 1.8 of currently. There was a 1.7, but I have version 1.8, and I'll put the link down in the description. You're eventually going to need, I think it's 5 different devices in the device manager of your computer. One that says they're all Connect Audio, Connect Video, Connect something else. So that you need to have 5 that are all good for this to work. So it took a little bit, and when I was running the program, it didn't recognize it right away, and I had to go back and find the right drivers to install before this worked. But it's just an exe file, and it runs through and installs these 5 drivers, and you have to go in your device manager and make sure they're installed properly before this will be working through your computer. Now, as far as your computer is concerned, you have to have a somewhat powerful computer, whether it's through the CPU or the GPU, the video card. I only have a $50 video card, so there's something on there called CUDA, which you can run this through the video card with the program you're going to be using. I didn't have that, but luckily I have an Intel i7 CPU, so I had no problems, no hiccups, no stuttering while it was scanning. I had no problems, but I did try this on my computer downstairs, which is 10 years old. It wouldn't even run it. It wasn't powerful enough to run it. So you're going to either need a good video card or a good CPU to do this. Whether it works or whether, I've heard people said when they're trying to scan, it skips and stutters and it doesn't work properly. So just bear that in mind. Whatever computer you put it on, it needs to be somewhat powerful. So once you have it all hooked up and the drivers installed, you need some sort of program to scan it and record that 3D file. Now there's two main programs that everyone uses. There's a program called Kinect and there's a program called Reconstruct Me. There's free versions of both, and I did not use Reconstruct Me for the reason that it was a little more complicated. I think people said it's more powerful, but it had a steeper learning curve. I could never really get it to work properly. I didn't use it, and you know, some people said it works for different areas. You can fine-tune stuff. I didn't use it. I used the program called Kinect, and that was very straightforward. There was 5 menus that you just followed right along. You scanned, you edited, you did this, and you exported it. It was very intuitive in how it works. So I recommend Kinect. It worked fine. I did use a little bit of cleanup later on with a program called Sculptress, because when I scanned myself there was some missing areas under my chin and on the top of my head, and with Sculptress it's very easy. You can grab it and extrude it and extend it up. There's other programs like Blender and 3D modeling programs that are another thing. The steep learning curve, but Sculptress is very easy. I could import the 3D model. I could fix areas that were blobs or something. I could kind of crease it a little, and like I said, there was a void under where this camera didn't catch. I could kind of fill in the gaps here and smooth it out. Now in just a second I'll go upstairs and show you how I actually do a scan, but let me tell you how I did the process of scanning. I was scanning myself. I tried to scan my 2-year-old son, but he would not sit still long enough. He was moving around and looking at himself on the TV. So you have to be somewhat still, and there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either sit or stand. In Kinect, there's different ways of scanning. You can scan a head, a body, or a room, so it sets the area that you're scanning. And all I've scanned is from my chest up. So you select the smallest area. I've seen some people where they'll scan their whole body. Now, if you're going to scan your whole body, you need to have someone hold the camera and move it along and scan all these different areas. You'll see it in the first menu. Once you hit record, you're scanning and you're watching, and once that area of the body turns red, that means the camera in the program has it recorded. So you can scan the whole body. Now, I was scanning myself, and what I did was I set the camera up to about eye level, and I sat in a chair that rotated, and I hit record, and I just slowly rotated the chair without moving. And when I came to the face area, I kind of went back and forth a few times to make sure it got that recorded. And like I said earlier, that did mean that I missed areas like under my chin and on top of my head, but I could fix that later in Sculptress. So just sitting and rotating in a chair slowly back and forth worked fine. I've seen people that have tried to hold the camera and do things on a pole. That totally didn't work. You had to be very still or else it didn't work. So that's how I scan myself. So let's go upstairs to my computer. I'll show you the setup that I had. You need some good lighting to make sure it's nice and bright, and I'll show you how I used the program and how I recorded it and made the 3D file, how I cleaned it up, how I made it watertight is what the program calls it, fix any of the voids, and then how I printed it off to get the little model. Okay, so here I am up at the computer, and I'll show you all the steps that I went through to scan and print off the little model. I plugged the Kinect into the computer, the USB I plugged into the front, the power, and I set it up on my 3D printer case here at about eye level, and I also have a shop light that'll shine when I do the scanning. Now, when you plug the device in, like I mentioned, it's going to say, recognized hardware, device not up to date or whatever. And once you install those drivers, you can go to Control Panel and Device Manager, and you'll see this. It has Kinect for Windows, and it has audio, camera, device security, and then also down in sound, you'll have USB audio. And those will only appear when the Kinect is plugged in and the drivers are up to date. The next thing is the program, and that is Kinect. I'm also showing down here on the right my CPU of my all the CPU cores, and you'll see when we do the scanning and the editing and everything, it really maxes it out. So it's nice to have a somewhat fast computer. And Kinect is very straightforward. There's prepare, record, reconstruct, process, and share. You just follow right along through the menus. And the first thing you want to do is check your settings. And you can see I have it on CPU only. My GPU is not powerful enough to do that as well. Feedback on medium and offline recording all frames. And that's for later on when you do an offline editing. Another thing I forgot to mention is when everything is working properly, this will be green, and it says Connect for Windows Sensor. If it's not right, like I said, the first time I did it, this kept saying yellow and could not connect. There'll be a message there. Type that message into Google, and there'll usually be an answer for you saying you don't have the right drivers or you don't have something right. And like I also mentioned, downstairs on my computer, I could never get this to become green and recognize my computer was not powerful enough. So, to set this up, you want to set your scanning area. And you can set it for body, which is what I use, which is 3 feet by 3 feet. And you'll see when you scan, that's how big the scanning box is. You can also do, if you want to be standing up, you can change your height to ×2. And that will make a 3 by 3, but it'll be 6 feet tall. Or you can change it to object, which is tiny, or room, which is bigger. So for what we're doing, set it to body. And everything else is fine. You can just go right to record up here at the top. And this is where you're going to do your actual recording. And this is where you can see yourself in the monitor, and I can see right there that it's too high. So I'm going to move it down a little. And I'm going to test to see that I can spin freely. Like I said, it might be better if I'm in a swivel stool or something without this big back on it, but this works okay as long as I sit off the back, because we're going to crop just this, and when you crop it you don't want to be sitting back because you won't be able to do it. So I can see that I'm in the scanned area. I'll turn the light on, and I'm going to hold my position and slowly rotate in front of the camera, making sure that I go back and forth on my face a few times. And this takes maybe 30 seconds. I'll make sure to speed up the video so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But just take your time going back and forth, and then press stop when you're done. Another thing is, when you scan, you'll see a thing on there called frame rate. You want to keep that frame rate above 18 frames per second. Anything slower, it means you're going too slow. It's a little different if you're moving the camera versus spinning. We'll be spinning, so I don't think it's as critical. But if you're moving the camera, you want to keep that frame rate above 18. If it's below, it means you're going too slowly. So you kind of want to keep going fast, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But I'll turn the light on, press record, spin around, and then we'll press stop. And I'm going to be watching the screen as I'm spinning. I want the scan to turn green, which means it has that data. When it's red on the edges in certain areas, it doesn't have it. So I'm kind of be watching as I'm turning to make sure I get certain areas green. So I'll go ahead and press record and spin around. And stop. So it takes a few seconds, and it's going to sync up that data. And you could see also when I was doing it down here on the CPU, that's really maxed out. And when we do these other edits, it's going to max it out. So you zoom in by, you'd think you use the wheel, it's not. It's you hold right click and you can zoom in. And I can see that it kind of screwed up the nose, and it missed the top of my head and under my chin, which is typical, those two areas. If this were a real scan, I would probably do it again and kind of make sure I got this area a little better. But that's fine for now. Now here is where you can do some post offline editing is what it's called. If you go to Fusion, I did that scan in medium. If you want to, you can hit high and it'll scan it again from those frames and it'll get a higher detail. Not always better, but it's a more little triangles or tessellations it's called. We're not going to do that. You can go to process. Now, an important thing to know here is there's no point in scanning high detail, high quality, everything high if you're just going to print it off on a 3D printer, because as you can see from some of these parts, it's not going to be able to print super accurate unless it's blown way up. So important thing to know is you want your scan to be a little bit better than what you're going to print. You know, there's no point getting a super huge file size that's super accurate in every detail and then printing it at this quality. So I do everything at medium, and even you have to lower those vertices down to do it in the next program we're going to use. So medium is what I usually set it at. So here in the process menu, the first thing I do is fill holes. And again, I set it to medium. It only takes a few seconds. If you go to low or very low, it takes a few minutes and it really maxes out these cores. So medium is fine, and do watertight. You run it and it just takes a few seconds on medium. But you can see it really maxes out some of these cores. So that's done. And now it's watertight. It's filled in the bottom. It's kind of guessed at the top of the head here and under the chin. The next is I do watertight again, and again for smoothing I leave it at medium. If you do it for low, it gets as much detail as it can, but we can't print it at that anyways. It also adds the color. Okay, and now the last thing you have to do is crop, and this is a little tricky. Cropping can be a little tricky. The first thing, you're moving these sliders to move it up, down, rotating it, and you want to crop it to that blue work plane on the bottom. So the first thing you do is move it down, and this is going to be a crop. It's going to crop it right here. So you move it down there and you hit crop to ground. You reset it and then you can move it up. And now you can see that it's nice and smooth on the bottom, which is what we want, because you want a smooth bottom. Otherwise it's going to be all jagged here on the bottom. You want something smooth to set it on. So that's that crop. So the next thing we're going to want to do is crop out the back of that chair. And you rotate this X direction until that chair is down. And then you grab this bottom one, move the chair portion below that blue work plane and hit crop to ground. And move it back up. So there is the cropped model that we have now. So that's pretty much all you need to know about editing within Kinect. The last thing you want to do is export the model. And something to note is this program will save a folder on your desktop or wherever you say, and it's got the date on it, and it's a huge file size. And you only need that if you're going to edit it some more. Once you export it to an OBJ or an STL file, you don't really need that giant file folder unless you want to go back and edit it some more. So we're going to export it to a smaller file size, but if we delete that folder with all those images in it, it takes small images, you can't go back and edit it. So that's one thing to note. Now, if you want to save that color scan, you want to save it as VRML. That's how you export it. If you think this scan is ready to print, you want to put it right into Cura, you can save it as .stl. But we're going to be using a program called Sculptress in a second to fix those flat spots, and that only works with a .obj. So that's how I'm going to save it. Another thing to know, I set it to inches, and the number of faces, this is what, 120,000 faces. That's too many for Sculptress. So we have to lower that. I'm going to lower it to 50,000. I'm going to hit export. Okay, that saved it at the 50,000 faces, and I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to lower this down to 25,000 faces. Let's say, and I'm doing that. It doesn't, it does degrade the quality a little, but not enough that it's going to screw with our printing ability and the detail we're going to print with. As you can see, it still looks pretty good. So, as far as editing on Sculptris or Kinect is concerned, we're done with this for now. And next is, I'm going to fix those areas with this program called Sculptris. And if you've never used it, it's free. It's really easy to use, and people have made some really great characters and models. And I've screwed around with it. And you can make like a, you know, like an octopus and all sorts of faces and things like that. You can move it around. You can add different textures and materials, and it's a really cool program if you've never used it. So, what we're going to do is go to Import. And we're going to go to Import, and I did have to import that second one I did. 50,000 faces was too much. So you had to go to that 25,000. And you can see it looks pretty good on here. I'm going to change the material just so I can see it better. And now I want to fix kind of that flat spot up on top. And again, it's tricky because in Kinect you're holding Shift to pan. On this one you got to hold Alt, so you got to get used to all the 3D movements in the different programs. And I'm going to go with, let's go to Inflate, and you set your size of your area and your strength, and you can just click and it moves it right up. So I'm just trying to fix spots that are bad. Again, I could have spent more time in here, and I think when I did this print, I did spend more time fixing all this little detail. You can spend as much time as you want in here, or if you want to just quickly run through it, which is what I'm doing. So this area on the back, you can go to flatten right there, and it just flattens it right down so you don't get any weird spots. So that's fine for the top, and now under the chin, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so I just got done spending maybe a minute. I fixed under the chin a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. And again, if you'll notice, it's not really even anymore on the bottom, but we can fix that in Cura. So this one is ready. So now we've scanned, we've edited, and now we're ready to print. And if you want to use Cura, it works fine. And you take that OBJ file and just insert it right in your drawing. And it usually comes in pretty tiny, even though I selected inches. You can go to Scale. And I think I did these at around 40 or 50 millimeters. So that's 50 right there on the print bed. And one thing you'll notice is, like I said, you can see the bottom is very uneven. So what you have to do to get an even print on the bottom, if you go to Advanced and you go Cut Off Bottom of Object, you can set this to 2 or 5 or whatever, and that'll make sure it's nice and smooth on that bottom layer. It's not trying to guess that bottom. But now it's ready to print, and you can set it for any size. Like you said, you can see that this is going to take 1 hour and 40. I think when I did these, I wanted them pretty good, so I set the layer height to 0.175 or even less, maybe what are the numbers? I think I set it to 0.13125 or whatever it is, and it took 2 hours, 2.5 hours, maybe 3. I did not do any overhang. It had a little bit of issue with the under the chin where it was just printing off into nothing. But I didn't really want any overhangs that were gonna break off and you had to sand down. It worked fine on some of this PLA. It was a little rough that I had to file down underneath, but there weren't any other issues. So that's all there is to it. You just export it to your G-code and you can print it. So I hope I explained everything that I did. Like I said, I've only done it a few times. That's the process I went through, but something to note is, like I said, there's no point in scanning this super high quality, super high detail, and then just going to print it, you know, at whatever your printer's going to print. So I found that a medium scan and everything is just fine, and that's about as much detail as you can print with anyways. It's not going to be super great around the ears and in the eye sockets. It kind of smooths that out. It loses a little detail. If I was going to print these much bigger, I might do a high quality scan, but again, that's really going to tax your CPU, and it takes a lot longer. So just know, if you do that low or very low and you hit run, it takes, you know, a couple minutes, as opposed to medium where it's right away. So it's a little bit tricky. You have to mess around with it, but I hope I explained enough that you might want to try it. And again, for 10 bucks for a scanner and, you know, some free programs and stuff like that, it's really cool. And like I said, out of everything I've printed, these are my favorite prints, because it's something you couldn't get anywhere else. It's not just something you downloaded off the computer. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you've ever done this in your experience, or any of your settings that are different. You can leave them in the comments or let me know. So I hope you like it. Thanks. Well, I hope you liked the video you just watched. If you did, feel free to subscribe by clicking the button on this side. You can also check out all the videos I've done, the playlist from things I've built, things I've fixed, home repair, 3D printing, and on this side you can check out a recommended video similar to the one you just watched. And as always, down in the description I'll put a link to my blog, which has more pictures and more information about the video you just watched. Thanks.